right, folks, let's cut right to the chase. We are reviewing another Disney live-action remake. This is the second one that has come out this year so far, and that just depresses me so much. Lilo and Stitch is one of those originals that I have a lot of nostalgia for, and I think sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference between nostalgia and the ability to look through an objective lens when reviewing a film. But I've gone back and rewatched that movie several times in the last couple of years, and I think it holds up. It's a genuinely great family story, and this is a remake that mostly follows the original faithfully. There are some changes that are made, and I'm going to discuss them vaguely, but I will avoid trying to divulge specific details just in case people haven't seen the original or they don't want to know what kind of changes there are in this new film. And I can't imagine many people have that mentality, because I think most people that are going to see the new Lilo and Stitch are just trying to recapture that feeling they got when they watched the original. So the opening 5 minutes of this new version basically is the first 15 minutes of the original squeezed and condensed into this smaller runtime. And I think it did a very good job of giving me a general idea of what I was about to witness with the rest of the film, in that it's rushed, it feels totally passionless in terms of the execution, but there is a visual faithfulness to it. And what frustrated me is somehow it made something that was so enticing and really got you hooked in the original and just made it come off as so flat. And I get that a lot of this is going to sound like nitpicking, but I'm going to give some brief examples. In the opening scene, there's no Captain Gantu. There's no Captain Gantu in the entire film. I would imagine that's a decision that was made for budgetary reasons, considering this was originally meant to be released straight to Disney+. But it just feels weird having one of the biggest villains in the story not be present. In addition to that, the spaceship fight scene / chase sequence in the opening scene is much shorter. It's barely there at all. I'm assuming that's another budgetary choice, but if they didn't have the money, like, it's Disney. First of all, you should have the money, and if you don't and you're not willing to spend it, why remake something like this? And after that opening scene, it just gets worse and worse. One thing that I will praise, and this is one of the few elements of the film that I think worked for me for the most part, is Stitch. They got him right. I think there's always a concern going into a movie like this that's translating animation to live action that you'll end up with the Sonic the Hedgehog effect, I guess you might call it. You guys all remember the original design for Sonic the Hedgehog that they were going to use for the live-action films, right? That's kind of what I'm referring to here. Visually, I was surprised by how much Stitch matches the environments. He feels like he fits. They got the saturation in his fur just right so that he doesn't look completely out of place in these real human environments. And they did manage to capture that adorable innocence blended with and destructive recklessness that Stitch exhibits in the original. It's also worth noting that Chris Sanders returns to voice him once again. If I didn't know any better, I'd say a lot of his lines were literally copy and pasted straight from the original, but I think he actually re-recorded them, and that's pretty cool. One other thing that I can praise, I actually liked Pleakley in this version. I know a lot of people were complaining that he doesn't cross-dress like he did in the original because, I don't know, apparently that's something that was so integral to the character that people are flipping out over it. In the original, when he and Jumba travel to Earth, they disguise themselves as tourists, and that can pass in an animated version, but of course in live action, you can pretty much recognize that any reasonable human being with half a brain cell would recognize them as not being humans. So in this version, they have to disguise themselves in the form of an actual human. And I'm sorry, but Billy Magnuson and Zach Galifianakis were just not the right choices to play these characters, especially Galifianakis, who is playing Jumba. And that character in the original has such a distinct voice and a completely different personality and character growth than he has in this version. Everything about it feels so inferior, tacked together, and they made changes for no reason other than to change things. It also does the thing where it adds characters that weren't in the original, and generally speaking, the parts that those characters play should be just distributed to the characters that I actually care about and want to see. There's this older woman who plays the neighbor of Nani and Lilo, and it feels like instead of giving Nani her proper character growth, they instead distributed some of what she was meant to do in the plot to this woman. No idea why they made that choice. There's also another social worker. In the original, it was just Cobra Bubbles, and he's still here, but he plays much less of a role because at first there's this other woman who comes into the home to observe Nani and Lilo's relationship, and it felt so much more forced to me. And that was such a pointless change to make. And let's be real, in a lot of movies that grow to be classics like this, the devil is often in the details, and there's so many details that they exclude in this version. For instance, in the original, Lilo photographs vacationers around Hawaii almost as a way of flipping the tourist gaze, and I've read several different interpretations out there as to why she might be doing that as a coping mechanism, and to not have that present here feels like it detracts so much heart from the film, even though it's such a small detail. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but when it comes to all of these remakes, I just feel like everything is a downgrade. Take a look at the picture that I'm going to throw on screen right now, and then go back and rewatch the original. Tell me how much of a difference it makes to watch this sequence in animation rather than live action. Not to mention, I thought some of the visual effects were pretty bad, once again signifying that this was clearly meant to be a straight to Disney Plus release. But the nail in the coffin for this movie, and it honestly dropped my score probably by a half star, is the ending, which totally ruins Nani. It ruins the theme of Ohana that this movie is so well known for. I'm not going to spoil what it is, obviously, and I've seen people say that it's more realistic than the original. People, if every movie aimed to prioritize reality over dramatic cohesion and integrity, a lot of them wouldn't be nearly as enjoyable as they are. And for a movie that's generally marketed towards kids, I think the original has quite a bit of realism in the way that it portrays a broken family of two sisters who treat each other terribly, borderline abusive to one another, but do have a great deal of deep love for one another buried under all of that. And above all else, it's so unbelievably frustrating to watch a one-to-one recreation of something that you love when the execution is so aggressively less effective and passionless. And I don't think the actors are horrible here, it's just that their line delivery comes nowhere near to that of the original. And look, casting Lilo was always going to be an extremely difficult task because it's difficult to ask child actors to lead a film of this gravity. And to the actress that plays her in the live action version, I wish her all the best, but her line delivery was often flat. Everybody looks bored and sounds bored, so am I. I'm gonna give the Lilo and Stitch remake 1.5 stars. That's a lower score than I gave the Snow White remake. And I know what you're probably thinking, Josh, how can you possibly give this a lower score than that when it's one of the most hated films of the year so far? And this one is generally getting positive reactions from critics. And I think there are two reasons that I dislike this more than Snow White. The first is that there's not a culture war behind this one like there was with Snow White. People have personal agendas against both Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler for reasons that have nothing to do with the film, realistically. I just think that's stupid. If you're going to review movies, have the integrity to separate the art from the artist. The other reason is that I hold this film near and dear to my heart, the original Lilo and Stitch. The original Snow White, I think, is just okay. I've never really gone back to revisit it, so I wasn't expecting the remake to really improve on it at all. But this one genuinely hurts. So those are my thoughts on yet another soulless Disney remake. Be sure to let me know what you think of it down in the comments, as well as hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.